All right. Welcome, everyone. Gave you 2 iterations of this beautiful song, at least some of you. So I think, and we have over 90 people in the room. So very excited to get this started with you. Let me just start up the slides so you can see this properly. So very warm welcome from myself. My name is Tobias Schimmer. I'm the CEO at FileWave. I've been at FileWave now for almost 11 months. And I'm really enjoying the journey more by the day that I have been here. We've already gotten quite far, and today, is another marker for me, given that this is my 4th event with you guys, and it's one of my favorite events because it gets me to interchange with many of you. And today we'll share more of what our current work is and what our current direction is that we want to take the company in. I have with me Vasily Suvorov. He's the Chief Technology Officer, and he will get us started with, I think, something that everybody here is very interested in. The investments that we are taking into the product, and I think the key things that we're working on the product side. So with that, over to you, Vasily.
Thank you, Tobias. Very excited to be here, and warm welcome to everybody. I've been with FileWave for slightly more than 12 months now, and just as Tobias, I also enjoy the journey. We keep accelerating and keep doing the right things, and just reflecting on the last 12 months in different events that I have attended, I think it's important to put things into perspective, and that perspective is, we're starting from relatively strong base. The company has been around for a long time, 15, 20 years actually. And when we look inside our product reflects that evolution, right? It has all kinds of interesting features in it. It supports all kinds of interesting use cases. And it certainly grew out of a certain, on-prem type of situation to support
this is the FileWave Alliance.
Support, various types of operating systems. However, the world is changing around us, and being on board and seeing what's happening around us, we interacted with many of you, heard, the need to move faster, to support new features faster, being able to support changes to the operating system faster, but also become more modern and become more suited for evolution of IT, right? So this is our mission, really, to help you manage not only the IT landscape as it is today, but also prepare for the future and solve some of the, big and important problems around automation, around ease of use, around scalability, around supporting, working from home, from anywhere, study in a hybrid environment, all these different things. And so we've been working quite a bit on understanding where do we need to invest and what are the priorities for us to move the product forward. And the things that you see on the slide, this 4 bullet points is essentially where we're investing. So let me just quickly talk through that. My introduction will be followed up to greater depth by Tony Keller, who will walk you through much more intimately through all these different areas, so you will actually get a taste for what's really going on. But let me just summarize, I guess, the reasons and what we're really focusing on. So first one is, that as a company, we've been talking about web UI for a while now. I think it's 4 years to be exact, right? Unless I'm mistaken. And we have never really gotten completely to give you the tool that really functions in the web. So it's really time that we change that. And we have decided that the best strategy to do that would be to start taking, complete workflows that exist in the tool that you all know, and that works most of the time well for you, the so-called native UI, and start, moving that to the web so you can do these things completely in the web, step by step, right? So Tony, again, will walk you through that. The idea here is that you see the progress, we get the feedback from you, and can react in time, prioritize features, and my reference to the reach past of our product is really meant to highlight the fact that maybe some of the features that we have in the product are no longer that important to you, right? And the best way for us to learn about that is to give you the tool that has some of these workflows and react to what needs to be changed, what needs to be updated, right? Actually, that migration works hand in hand with cleaning up the code base. Again, here the reference to the rich history comes handy, because obviously if you keep building up the house, right, after a while you kind of need to take a look at it and say, is it structurally sound, right? Does it serve the purpose? So when we look at our code base, there's things there that actually do not allow us to move fast, right? Also, because we haven't really finished this transition, at the back end, we sometimes have to do things 2 times, right, in 2 different places, which also limits our capability to move faster. So we need to, take a good look at that. We are taking a good look at that. We're changing that with the end result for you, that the code is becoming much more modular. That means, we can move faster. That means it works better. It's more reliable. And you will see your everyday benefits there, right? Now, that also brings me to the next point, right? So what's the future just beyond making things easier for you to use and us being able to react faster and move faster? That's obviously us providing more complete service. I think it's very normal these days that customers expect that when they consume enterprise solution, that solution is being managed for them, right? They don't have to upgrade it. They don't have to maintain it. They can just use it, right? And this is our goal. We've actually done quite a bit of things already in terms of setting up our cloud platform and preparing for the move. And as we do the cleaning up of the code and make it more modular, more ready in making architectural changes to make it more ready for cloud, you will start seeing these benefits as well. And this work is an important work that continues, and we're making a lot of progress. So as we make these changes, you will see it and hopefully give us good feedback for that, right? Finally, I said that a lot of these changes meant to unleash our productivity, remove the blockers for us to move faster and support you better. But obviously, you're the customers, you using the code, you have the issues that need to be solved. So we really want to hear from you. How can we be, how we can be better? And last year, we have already introduced product board and have started opening the feedback cycle. And thank you very much for providing the feedback. There was actually there was a lot of good things there. But now we actually making next steps and making it even more integrated, especially for the new functionality that we'll be releasing into the web, where you can provide feedback right in the application itself and let us know very quickly what works, what doesn't, what could be improved. So those things are important. Just to summarize, we're making a lot of changes, learning from the history, taking the best parts of it and making it future-proof. With one single purpose: make us work better for you, right? This is what we're actually trying to do. With that, back to you, Tobias.
Thank you, Vasily. That's a great summary. So, just to double down on that, I think it's also showing in not only the things that Vasily has talked about, how we're, allocating the time and efforts on our product. We're also doing that or showing that by heavily investing in our team. So this year we're adding 29 positions to FileWave, and especially on the technical side, we're really bolstering up the teams, right, to really increase our ability to execute along the priorities that Vasily talked about. And here I want to showcase a few talents that we're able to win that have already started. So there's Maximilian Ode. He's the head of cloud platform. So he is actually spearheading a lot of the work that Vasily just talked about, right? Making our product cloud ready and really make it a lot easier for you in the future to maintain the latest version and basically work with FileWave. We were also able to convince Jürgen Schulz-Brissel, based in Berlin, to join us. He's the head of the Agile practice. So he works with the Scrum Masters, basically on the plumbing of FileWave, right, to make that more effective and really increase the rate at which we will churn out new features and innovation eventually for you guys, right? So I think both the plans that Vasily has talked about, but then also I think the people that we're adding, I think if you bring these together, I think we're on a great trajectory. On the business side, we've also signed a couple of new talents that make me very excited. I actually heard earlier that there might be quite a few prospects in this call, right? And we want to be a better interface to potential customers that are interested in FileWave as well, next to you existing customers. That's why we have signed a director for enterprise sales in EMEA, and we also have signed a global head of marketing who will help us to communicate, much better to prospects, but then also to you, our existing customers, and really make that communication between FileWave and the world out there much more fluent. So I think more to come. These guys will be announced once they've started. They will start in the next 2 months. So at the next Alliance event, we can also tell you a bit more of who they are. Next up, so I think I'm a big fan of measuring things and measuring how we're actually doing, because one is the stories you tell and the things you do, but in the end, I think I also want to get some quantitative data on whether that's actually whether you agree with what we're telling, the story that we're telling, and that's why we are measuring the Net Promoter Score once every quarter. And here you can see 2 curves. The blue one is for product and the red one for support. For those of you who don't know the Net Promoter Score, basically what it is, it's a very simple question. It's a one question where you basically rate the product or the support on a scale from 1 to 10. And then science has shown that basically, the top scores, these people that score you very well, they would typically promote you. And then, the lower scores, they're typically detractors, so they wouldn't recommend you. And then there's a neutral section in the middle. And the NPS score, all it is really subtracting how many promoters you have from how many detractors you have. And if it's above 0, it basically means, right, you have more people that like your product than people that don't like the product. And then the industry has come up with, and I've tried to kind of make that visible with the color code here, with certain fields of where you can be and where you should be. So between 0 and 30, it's good. Between 30 and 70, it's great. And then above 70 is excellent. To give you some perspective, I think to get to excellent, like you have to be a really amazing product, right? So something like Apple would achieve scores above 70. I think in our field, if you get to the great section, that's already very, very good. Yeah, if I look at the scores of the peers. So let's talk about the results, right? So I think what you can see is that we have started kind of low in Q4 on the product, just above needs improvement, but now we're able to stabilize, I think, on a decent, right? A decent level. But obviously we're not satisfied, and I think that's why we're doing all the work that Vasily talked about. That's why we're heavily investing into people that will help us get the work done that we showed you. And yeah, we're hoping to really, increase that score again and really get the product into the great region in the next couple of quarters. I think what makes me very happy is the support curve. As you can see, it's already been on the great scale with a score of 30 in Q4 20 and then also Q3 21. And now we really had a big jump up in Q4 21. So it makes me very happy, and big kudos to the FileWave support team who, I think this is showing, is doing a good job out there to really try and service you, our customers, the best we can. Like, this is a continued priority. We'll continue to invest and support, we believe, because our product is very deep. We think it's a key part of our offering, and we really want to continue on that tracking. So we have just launched the next NPS survey yesterday, and I would appreciate if you would fill it out. If you haven't received it, here's the QR code that you can scan, and then I think someone on the team will also put the link in the chat. Please participate. It's 3 simple questions, one on product, one on the support, and then I think one on recommendation. So it only takes 2-3 minutes max. It's very little of your time, but it really helps me to actually put some numbers behind the sentiment on the front lines of you guys using our product, because I do realize that every situation is a little different, right? So every customer is using the product different, and sometimes there are issues. We know that with the product in certain circumstances. So I do want to continue collecting this picture and get some data to make sure that we are holding ourselves accountable as well to make sure we are on the right track with what we're building for you guys. So that brings me to the agenda of today's meeting. As Vasily has linked to, I think we have a couple of very exciting topics or deep dives. So next up will be a deep dive into the topics that Vasily has talked about, and I think a very practical deep dive actually. And it sprang out of a discussion that Tony Keller, our VP of Product Management and Reliability, had with John Humphrey, a very valued and long-term customer of ours, where John asked some very, I thought, very holistic and very good practical questions about, hey, what does this mean for me as an existing customer, right? What does this journey look like for me? And the guys are gonna dig into that and basically replay that conversation that they had together with the answers that we provided to John. And then after that, also very exciting, we have Manu from Belgium. He's a very long-term partner. He's been a partner of FileWave of over 20 years. So it links to kind of the legacy of FileWave. He's a super talented IT consultant, and he's going to showcase some of the depth that we are providing and some of the things that you can do with FileWave. So again, I think very, very exciting part of the agenda. After that, we'll wrap up, give you a bit of an outlook of what's coming in the next couple of months, what kind of events are happening as well. And then we'll conclude with Ask FileWave Anything, which is basically an open session where you can ask any kind of question. I always say there's no stupid questions, both around FileWave in general, but then obviously also technical around the product and so on and so forth. So with that, very excited to get to the next section. Over to you, Tony.
Good morning, everybody. Hopefully you can hear and see me okay and see my screen, I'm hoping.
It's showing the Ring Central window.
Still?
It just says start chatting. Yeah.
Okay, one sec. Let me switch that. Guess it helps if you choose the right monitor.
Yeah, now it's right.
All right, so thank you. John, are you out there?
Yes, Tony, I am here. Good morning, Tony and Tobias and all others.
Good morning, and I want to say a special thank you to John. John reached out to us a few weeks back asking us some questions about the web admin. John is with Huntington County Community Schools. He asked some really good questions. We were hearing the same questions from lots of folks. And we thought, what better way to do that than to kind of rehab the conversation that we had with John and the team there at Huntington. So we're going to reenact this. There's actually a little bit of new content here, some things that John hasn't seen. But mostly this is a reenactment. So we're acting a little bit, but what was an ad hoc conversation? Thankfully, I watched some Steven Seagal and Jason Statham movies last night, so I'm all prepped on the acting front. I know just what not to do, right? So we're all good. So we had a really good call kind of going through these things. So what we're going to do is John's going to ask these questions again, and then we're going to kind of step through them. I apologize if the slides have a lot of words on them, but they're a lot of answers. And we wanted to make sure to get these all kind of on paper, as it were, so that you have a copy of them. So let's go ahead and start here. All right, John, over to you.
Okay. Question number one, like the screen says, our team here at Huntington County is a little concerned about a plan or timeline to fully migrate off the FileWave admin. We've been using FileWave admin since the beginning. We're on year 11, I believe, with FileWave. And just the aspect of when are we not going to be able to use that, and when do we have to migrate to the web application and discontinue the use of the native application?
All right, great, and thanks. And the answer to this is that mostly yes. There's a timeline here. There's a timeline that we're looking at, and mostly discontinuing of the native tool. But let's talk about it kind of piecemeal here a little bit. So the first part, there is a plan to move administrative functionality over to the web admin. That's the destination. Like Vasily spoke about before, we're trying to move to cloud first. Obviously, the web gives us some advantages in being device agnostic, and obviously, you can travel better with it, and the API functionality as well. We found especially that has really hit home for a lot of customers, what can be done with that API with automation. Over the next 18 months or so, this is really the primary focus for the company in general, along with kind of some of the back-end pieces that are more like the sausage being made that you don't really see, but some back-end refactoring to bring the solution up to date, to modularize it basically, to allow us to do releases that are more piecemeal, where we can release features for Apple or for Microsoft or for Google that are not related to the others. So we're trying to get to a place where we can do that, and this is really going to help us do that. So we're looking at least for the next 18 months where we're really focusing on this. Our intent as we move things into the web admin is to minimize, we can't eliminate altogether, but to minimize the impact of the changes as we move them, while also looking at improving functionality where we can, or at minimum, looking at the backlog of requests for enhancements so that we make sure in what we initially implement that we can then easily look to those additional feature requests in future. What we're really trying to focus on are, as Vasily said, complete workflows, or at least we don't want you to have to do a 4-step process where step A is in the native admin and then step B is in the web admin, and then you have to come back to native, etc. So we're trying to make complete workflows, and I'll give an example of that here in a second. So the first release where we're moving, right, not in parallel, but moving functionality to the web admin will likely be after the upcoming release. So not the next release, which would be 14.8, but the release after that. And these are the things where we'll have some functionality moving. We'll be moving Apple profile creation and editing to the web only. We'll be moving DP profile creation and editing to the web only. We will support payload file set revision choice in deployments, which we don't do today. So it's kind of a little enhancement there. And then we're going to include an associations converter, which we're going to talk about next. And the point here when I'm talking about the workflows is that when we're working with, say, an Apple profile, when you go to create that profile, you need to be able to go ahead and assign it to devices, and you'll be able to do all of that within the web and can kind of complete that workflow. Right. You'll find elements in our rough order of migration in the product board portal. And I do want to point this out. Vasily mentioned before that there's some additional functionality there. I'm going to break out of this presentation for just a second and show you that in the, and I wanted to remind everybody, when you go to help.filewave.com in the support portal, it links over to the roadmap and to our product feedback portal. This is kind of being updated right now, but the roadmap, when you link over to it, you'll see that now it's not just a recreated PDF, and I'm actually very happy with this particular advancement, but these are now not just labels, but if we look at, say, the native profile editor decommission, there's a detail page here too that gives you detail on what this change is and what release we're targeting things for. I will also mention just very shortly that we generally have 6 what we call swim lanes here, or teams, development teams, all having a different kind of function, but it breaks things out by the platforms here you'll see, and then kind of our core backend team that supports those platforms, our core backend team and core UI teams. But this is now interactive, which we're very pleased with. All right, and we're almost done with this slide, but there we go. Okay, so on the no part of this, where I said it was mostly yes, but a little bit no, we're not going to be rid of a native tool entirely. As we're moving functions over to the web, of course, we'll be removing those from native, but the tool that we have at the end of that is not just going to be everything that's we remove from the admin, and whatever's left over is the admin tool. There's going to be a new tool, basically, that's a native tool that's probably going to look at an incorporation of things like Faucet Magic and the more advanced file set / payload work that you can do in FileWave now, because obviously the native tool has some advantages over the web when it comes to that deep integration with the local OS. So a bit of an overview there. I know there's a lot of detail and a lot of words for a slide, but it was a really good question, and that's why I wanted to touch on it. All right. And I did forget to mention at the beginning, feel free to ask any questions you like. We're not going to answer them now, but we will hold on to those questions for the AMA session a little bit later. Next question, John.
Okay, next question we talked about, Tony. Will all existing file sets and associations made to our devices currently be available in the web admin? Again, we've been using this for 11 years, and I've got thousands of file sets. It does not appear that to be the case currently, with associations now being called deployments. So if you could touch on that, thank you.
Yeah, and that's, again, a really good question. And yes, the associations are going to be made available in the web. And technically, they're not called deployments, although deployments is kind of the next gen version of associations. So it's kind of like associations V2, if you want to think of it that way. Some folks have started using deployments, but it's very much, awkward if you're using associations and deployments and having to move back and forth between them. So the answer is yes. There's going to be a tool available in the web to see associations. Again, in this release after next, associations will be visible in the web, specifically in a tool that we've been calling kind of an associations converter. And we're going to look at kind of a prototype of that here in a little bit. But basically, the point of that tool is to convert associations over to deployments, and we'll talk some more detail there. Even if you've never used them, deployments are more efficient than associations. Now, it's very, very easy in the native admin to, bring in a new app and then right click on it and say create association and assign that to 4 different groups. But then later, when you want to manage that thing, you have to go find those 4 different associations and then edit them en masse to edit those settings. And deployments group all this stuff together, so there's really just one record. It's more easily found and more easily edited, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But it's kind of my pleasure always to present this material, but there's an army of people behind the scenes that are doing all the real work when I get to sit here and talk about it. And Marco, whose last name I'm going to mispronounce, but Lysixa, has done a really good prototype. He's one of our designers, and he's done a really good prototype of this associations converter. So we're going to break out of this for a second and go take a look at that. Right, so if we take a look here. So this is kind of a mock-up. It's kind of an interactive prototype. Normally we don't show stuff super early, but this is just really kind of dialed in and gives you, I think, a good feel for what associations to deployments would look like. So in this view in the web, you'll see that we have associations showing, right? And in the kind of detail view here, we see all of these different payload associations where we got payloads assigned to which group, what type of assignment is it direct, is it kiosk, etc. You can search in here to look for certain things, so it kind of makes it an efficient tool for doing that. And you see, mostly we've got Chrome in here with a couple of other examples. We're going to specifically talk about the Chrome one, even though this is an odd combination. But in reality, what we find in most environments is associations can be very messy like this, where it may be a little bit of a surprise that you've got different versions of things going to different groups. But in this, we're going to look to coalesce all these Chrome assignments into one deployment. So we'll get rid of these, 12 or 13 records here and create from this one deployment, right? So we're going to go ahead and click on move these to a deployment. And then it gives us an option to see, kind of what we're doing with that. And I can't scroll, but I can go to the next one here. There we go. So in this, we can select what deployments we want to do. In this case, right, this would allow us to add them to a pre-existing deployment. So something I already have. And many of you, if you're doing file set groups and associating file set groups to kind of a high level manual groups in your environment, you're kind of doing deployments already, right? But in this case, we're going to create a new deployment from this. So when we click new deployment, you'll remember in that first screen, we had all sorts of conflicts where we had different versions of Chrome going out to all these devices. So this tool is going to warn you about those conflicts and say, hey, you have to resolve them before you can move forward. So in this case, we've got Chrome as the package that we're going to assign, and we've got the targets. Those all automatically come in, right? So we've got a marriage of payloads to targets, and we can of course edit it and add exclusions and such, but we need to deal with these conflicts. And the first conflicts here is on the options side of things. We've got a conflict, and it shows us, right, that we've got a conflict in how we're assigning this content, that 10 of the 12 associations are direct, but 2 of the 12 are kiosk, right? So we have to resolve this. How do you really want it to be when you create them? So we're going to do a direct installation, and that kind of resolves that conflict for us. We also had differing options on the timing. This we don't call a conflict exactly, we just kind of take the timing away. And especially as you convert it, you're going to want to pay attention to how you're doing timed things. But generally, if you're editing something you've already done, the timing's probably not too important now. So we also need to resolve the conflict on the payload. And that conflict is that there's no revision, right? We don't know which version of Google Chrome we're deploying to these devices. So we need to pick it, right? And in this case, we're going to just pick this default revision, right? So it's the same one. And that resolves that conflict for us as well. Okay. Now, when we resolve those conflicts, we'll get an option to preview what deployment that would be created. This is going to be tweaked just a little bit, so these removals and additions will actually just show as modifications. But you can see here that on the highlights that we've changed the association type to be direct. We've changed some timing options, and these revisions will show down here as modified as well. So we kind of get a preview of what the changes are. And if we talk about things that are added or removed, if we totally removed a package, like if we selected multiple things, it would show as a removal. And if we were adding something new, it's going to show as an addition as well. So once we're done with all that, we can go ahead and publish that deployment. And when we publish it, the associations will go away, and now we'll have that one new deployment, as it were. Right, so that's just kind of a general overview of what this is going to look like. We're still soliciting feedback on this, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it. All right, so let me hop back in here. So we took a look at that. Let's go ahead and hop into our next question, but it's a related question.
Will there basically be a clear and easy migration path for all my existing iOS, macOS, and Windows file sets? Again, we've got 11 years worth of things in there. Currently in the native FileWave admin application of the web admin.
Yeah, and that's exactly what this tool that we were just showing is for, right? So the answer is yes, there's going to be an easy way to do it, but it isn't just a conversion tool. As you just mentioned, John, you have 11 years worth of content, and what we see in almost all environments is that it gets really, really messy very quickly with associations, and most environments need kind of a hefty cleanup, and this conversion tool allows you to do that. So you can be able to filter in there and say, oh, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why am I associating it to this group but not this group? Or maybe I can bring these things together and do an association, a deployment at a higher level with some, a little bit of cleanup as we go along. So it's both a little bit of a change, but also an opportunity for cleanup. And we're going to try to make that as simple as we possibly can. All right. And again, just on deployments, they're more easily found because there's actually a record for them that's a named record. Whatever you name it, you can then search for it later. So there are things to be considered for deployments, and this kind of leads into the next question, but we'll need to make decisions like, do we want to focus on deployments that are application based, or do we want to focus on deployments that are more destination based, where, say, we're sending something to sales as a department, for instance, right? So the deployments are more easily found. They're better overall content assignment tools, simply because there's some new tools in here that you don't have with associations, but we're also got a little bit of a backlog of some of the great things that you can do in associations that we're putting into deployments as well. So we've got both a today plan and a future plan for this that we kind of call Deployments V2 that's out there on the horizon for us. And then the last of the 4 questions that you had, John.
Basically, my last of 4 questions. My next question was, will it be training made available? Again, looking at the web, the web admin, I as a user of the native admin for over 11 years, like, what is this? I'm a little confused. So I guess my question is concerning just training and sessions, and I'm not that smart, so I'm gonna guess I'm gonna need a lot of training on that. But just the things we do from day to day and our daily changing the web admin to our daily driver.
Right, and of course, that's a good question too, or if it weren't, we wouldn't have included it here on the slides, but it's a good question. We've heard that question from a lot of folks too. There's several options on the training front. The first, and sometimes it maybe can slip under the radar, is there's actually integrated help directly within the web admin. When you're in the web admin on any particular page, the little question mark that you see at the top, if you click on it, that's got targeted content for the view that you're in. And to Vasily's point earlier, he mentioned with Product Board, with this next big iteration of the web admin, there's also going to be integrated Product Board portals for you to provide feedback on those particular views. So there'll be a feedback loop for, say, the devices view, a feedback loop for the reports view, etc. So there is integrated help directly in there. Generally, we try to keep that help very short in a, how, when, and why, and what kind of format for those questions. Additionally, we're updating Foundry content. We've wanted to do so for a while, but we've been waiting for the web content to kind of catch up, which it is, which means that we can now produce content that actually includes the web content. As we've got complete workflows, we're going to be building that. So that'll be free, of course, and you can get to that content anytime you like. We're also, Josh and I were talking over the past couple of weeks about doing maybe some monthly webinars, not super long, but like an hour with maybe a little Q&A afterwards that any FileWave admins can attend, right? And all those 3 options would be free. And then the last option on here is if you're looking for kind of custom one-on-one training, the PS team is also available. If you have PS hours either available to you already, or if you want to buy some, you can use it for that too. So if you want specific training in your environment, there's a paid option, but there's lots of free options too. So I do want to say thank you, John, for participating and letting me drag you into this. I really appreciate both your honesty and your questions and your forthrightness, and really appreciate you making the time to join us here today. All right, and I think John's muted still, but thank you, John. Now I'm going to go ahead and pass things over here to Andreas Gluck, who's going to do a little bit of an intro for Manu and the kind of partner view of FileWave that he's going to present.
Yeah, thank you guys, and hello everybody, also from my side. Hope you're doing fine. I do have the pleasure today to introduce you to Manu from our partner Linton from Belgium. We're really happy to have him here today, giving us a deeper view of FileWave's capabilities from someone with more than 20 years of experience, helping customers, helping companies all around the world. Yeah, I think that's enough. Welcome, Manu. Thank you for being here. Stage is yours.
Thank you, and hello, and thanks for the opportunity to introduce myself and my company. If my clicker starts working, yes. Linton is a division of Catena company and is devoted to the Apple platform. We are a small team based in Belgium, and we are operating all over the world. We help organizations of all sizes and across all verticals to integrate Mac and iPad into their environment, and we are focusing on flexible and efficient use of resources while always keeping cybersecurity needs of those organizations into our mind. Our devotion to the Apple platform expresses itself into our membership of both the Apple Consultant Network and being one of the very few Apple training providers in our region. And last but not least, it was mentioned a couple of times, we are a FileWave partner for around 20 years. Please note that the logic I'm explaining today is applicable both for PC and for Mac. However, in our company, we focus on the Mac, but feel free to copy the logic to your Windows devices. We don't judge. If you want to get in touch, you can always reach out via one of the following channels. The slide will show up at the end again, and the slides will be available for download after the meeting as well. Should any questions arise during the presentation, feel free to post them in the chat. Jolie or one of the FileWave employees will gather them, and we will have some time definitely at the end to discuss those. Today, I want to tell you two stories. The first one may sound a little bit odd, but in fact, it's one of the most common questions we receive when we are integrating Mac into cross-platform environments. The second story, or in the second story, we will have a look at the different scenarios on how applications can be deployed, managed, and maintained during their lifecycle. As an experienced FileWave admin, you probably know how important it is to have the right and powerful tools at your disposal. But sometimes company politics come into play and they limit your possibilities or potential. For instance, when politics require to register devices in Microsoft Intune or Endpoint Manager as it's called today. As I mentioned, my stories are true for both PC and Mac, and Endpoint Manager is often seen as the one solution to rule them all. I know we know better, but when you dive into it, you will soon discover Endpoint Manager's limits. Projects are put on hold, delayed, or worse of all, they are delivered in an as-is implementation, resulting in frustration, a crippled user experience, or a limited user experience. But what if we could extend the functionality of Endpoint Manager? What if we could fill the gaps? To be clear, your Mac enrolls into Endpoint Manager and receives its profiles, activation lock management, file vault management, PPPC controls, etc. They receive it all from that end. When we look at features like application deployment, configuration management, complex installers, self-healing, high-efficient use of the network bandwidth, you'll soon discover that Endpoint Manager has its limits. I also know you can use shell scripts in Endpoint Manager for the Mac, and that's exactly what we will use just to install the FileWave client. When you dive into the FileWave preferences, you will have the option to upload your own custom client. Well, that PKG is then accessible over HTTPS on the FileWave server. We can create a simple shell script that downloads and runs the installer, and we are basically set and ready to go. Obviously, we want to use the advanced FileWave features with as little as manual effort as needed. So why don't we put our new client into some FileWave groups right from Endpoint Manager? Custom fields and smart groups are what you need here. In the shell script, just write a certain value to a file on the file system of that client. In FileWave, we can use a client script to grab that value and store it into a custom field. From that point on, you can use smart groups to define or scope your deployments or assignments or whatever they might be called now or in the future. Let's have a closer look at what happens exactly on which side of the story. Your devices, they come from Apple Business or Apple School Manager, and they enroll into the MDM via DEP or Automated Device Enrollment, as it's called today. From the Endpoint Manager side, you can specify conditional access policies like you don't have access to the environment until full disk encryption is enabled, and so on. Configuration profiles, PPPC controls, and all that kind of stuff, it needs to go through the MDM connection. And since the device is MDM enrolled in Endpoint Manager, this is where those profiles live. Finally, we send one script that kicks off the FileWave client installation and write the value for the custom field for later pickup. When the device arrives in FileWave, then we can start with the real job. Complex installers with self-healing functionality, they are downloaded from the boosters to reduce network traffic, seriously improving download and installation times. Scripting variables kiosk or self-service installs, they are all kicked from the FileWave side. And of course, we can use the extreme flexibility provided by FileWave. Reports, queries, and custom fields, they are all populated with data live from our client fleet. Just to be clear, I'm not promoting the necessity of Endpoint Manager, but when politics come into play and you are forced, you no longer have to be limited. When I talked about user experience earlier, always keep in mind that providing the best possible user experience for your colleagues is or should be your core focus. It's up to us to put the right technology into their hands and make sure that using that technology is as pain-free and frictionless as possible. And we all know or have experienced a tension field between cybersecurity and user experience. When we have a look at how we can provide the needed software to our beloved colleagues or customers, we see different possibilities and different challenges. Let's have a look at a very typical scenario where different departments have different needs in terms of their toolbox. We see 3 departments using more or less the same tools. For the production department, we know that they heavily rely on certain plugins or scripts and automation tools. Installing updates for those tools always require extensive testing just to make sure that everything stays operational. In another department, exactly the same tools are used, but much more freely. This department is much more creative, and holding back new features or possibilities seriously limits their creativity. This department wants updates to be installed as soon as possible, while the first department, the production unit, wants to delay updates until functional testing is completed. For other tools, shared across all departments, updates are released on a much higher frequency. In most cases, those updates are security related, so we want them to be processed and applied as soon as possible. As FileWave admins, we know we can use different types of file sets. We can shoot the installer, like a PKG or a MSI on a Windows machine or PKG on a Mac, and hope for the best. The quality of the installer is not in our hands, and we don't always know how the application handles updates. Are we able to install it at the login window? Do we have to be or need to be admin to apply updates? Is installing the application enough, or do we want to apply certain configuration or parameterization to the application? Well, we all know what to do in that case, and that's to build the file set manually or using file set matching. Building such file sets require a certain skill level and can be time consuming. That's why you should always build them from code instead of manually. This ensures quality and consistency. But what if there would be something in between building the installer or building the file set and just shooting the installer? Well, since the last couple of years, we at Linton started to implement what we now call auto apps. In my story, we are talking about the Mac, but the logic can be applied to Windows as well. Let's start with why. Well, aren't we all lazy? No, just kidding. Some applications, they really benefit from immediate updates. Think about Chrome, Firefox, Adobe Reader, and so on. These are all applications with very frequent updates, which are often security related. Instead of frequently starting the update engines from our side, why not make use of some client-side logic to process and apply those updates? It also reduces the network traffic towards the FileWave server, which can be beneficial in homework or VPN scenarios. Although we are quite sure that a connected client is and stays up to date, don't always take anything for granted. Don't take anything for granted. Better safe than sorry. So please monitor the results using tools like Microsoft Defender or Sentinel-1, Or maybe, why not use FileWave? Defender or Sentinel-1, they throw some extra data or insight into the mix, but they aren't free to use. And since you have your FileWave licenses. FileWave inventory or queries or reports, as we call them today, they provide an insight in which applications and respective versions are active in your clients, and of course, who or which devices require your attention when they stay behind. The logic we use is quite simple and can easily be adapted for your own use. We use three types of scripts per software title, and downloads are done over HTTPS, the software downloads, not the file set, obviously. This way, we can benefit from built-in security functionality like Gatekeeper and XProtect or third-party antivirus solutions. We compare the installed version with the available version and act based on the result of that comparison. We also check for certificates found in the installer, and these should provide an exact match with what we expect before any installation can take place. Per software title, we created 3 scripts and we put them into one file set. The first one is the install script, which runs as an activation script. It fetches the installer from a known location and knows how to handle the different types of installers we can expect. PKGs, zip files, DMGs, apps in zips, apps in DMGs, and so on. The install script then checks for a developer certificate and compares it to a known value. If that's okay, we process the installer and we're done. The second script, well, it is a little bit more complicated and is used to process the updates of the application. This script lives in our file set as a verification script. It runs by default every 24 hours and after every reboot. It compares the installed version of an application with the available version. If there is an exact match, we exit the script and we're done. If not, we continue our evaluations. We download the installer and process it depending on the type, DMG, PKG, and so on. Again, over the next step is checking the developer certificate. And again, we compare it against what we expect. Next, we check if the application is running. If so, we mark it as such, and we display a simple dialog where the user can choose if they want to close the app and allow us to apply updates, or if they want to update at a later time. If they choose the process to update, we close the app, process the update, and relaunch the updated application. If they asked for a delay, we wait for 1 hour and display the dialog again. The third script in the file set is a post-uninstall script, and that removes the application and unloads launch daemons or launch agents or whatever is needed. The simple rm-rf does the trick. These auto apps, they can be assigned and deployed to clients using simple associations, or they can be provided as a kiosk association. It's whatever you desire. Using these scripts or comparable logic, we can deploy updates much faster and with minimal effort from both the end user and the administrator. I have some anonymized data here to prove this from a real-life implementation. On day 1, version 2 of the application is released. So everyone is using version 1, version 2 is released on that day. Depending on when the FileWave verify of each device takes place, we see that around 10 to 15% of our fleet already applied the update. The second day, that percentage has already grown to 80% or 85%. And on day 3, nearly every device is updated. On day 4, again, an update is released by the vendor, and again, we are seeing very high adoption speeds. Our colleagues from the security department are happy, and we can focus on that single one client that stayed behind. Albeit this can be very useful in several scenarios, some remarks or considerations. Scripts require maintenance, since download locations might change or other changes are implemented directly by the vendor or the developer of the software. FileWave self-healing is somehow limited when we use auto apps. However, removing the app and running a verify will reinstall it from default, and the app will reinstall the default app. Whatever happens inside the application bundle is unknown to FileWave and cannot be evaluated for self-healing. Finding and maintaining the correct download locations sometimes can be tricky. And when a developer releases an update, well, that update is applied within a 24-hour time frame. You don't have exact control over the moment it hits your clients, but in most cases, that's just fine. If you want, you can still cache the installers on a web server. That way, you'll have a little bit more control over the timing of the installation, or you can hold back updates until validation is completed, when that should be a requirement for your environment, obviously. That concludes my two stories. I really hope you can use it for your own inspiration, and if you get stuck or need some help, that's what we do for a living. Feel free to reach out via one of the following channels. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manu. Thank you very much. That was really, really interesting, those stories, both sides. Again, if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask, get in touch with him. Yeah, thanks a lot for your time, for your effort.
And chime in there, Andreas, if I could real quick. Yeah. You know, I think that was just a really cool application of the available tool sets in FileWave to do something that just out of the box it doesn't do, right? And that was really neat, the way that you've put that together and used those tools. And I think even as we go more into the web, you're going to probably find that those API calls are going to be especially helpful too in these kinds of things. So I just thought that was really well done. I just wanted to say thank you as well.
Cool. So,
I agree. Sorry.
I'll hand over to Josh. Welcome, Josh.
Hey, so I just wanted to say too that yeah, that was really a good presentation. It gave me some things to think about, and if you want me to maybe paste the same info you had on that slide, maybe paste it into the chat, just so that people have your info, because we do rely on kind of a worldwide partner network. Some people work with our professional services folks. We have folks in the US, in Europe, and in Asia Pacific, but partners sometimes work with many products, and have unique experiences. So it can be really good to work with a partner. So definitely share your info. And I imagine, Manu, you do work with folks around the world. You're not limited to a region. Would that be correct?
That's correct. Our customers are located mainly in EMEA region, but the clients which are under management, yeah, they travel literally around the world a couple of times each day. Not so much in the past 2 years, but we are starting to see things moving again.
Okay, good. So yeah, and if anybody wants to either work with professional services here or with a partner, and you're not sure what step to take, you could email professional services. We have an email address. In the past, it's been a web form on our webpage, but this is a simple email address, easy to remember. And even if you want to reach out to us and say you just don't have Manu's contact information and you'd like to, maybe speak with him, or you need a partner that can speak Japanese, for instance, reach out to us for any unique scenario. Okay. So with that, I'm gonna. Oh, sorry. Was there something? Oh, okay.
I was just saying cool and thank you. So word is back to you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So I'm going to hand over to Mary for a second, just to talk briefly about ClassSpaces, and then we're going to head back to the AMA.
Thanks, Josh. Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. I know everybody has really busy schedules, so we greatly appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to join this Alliance meeting with us. So I'm going to give, as Josh said, a very quick overview of our new standalone classroom management tool, ClassSpaces. I'm going to date myself just a little bit here and say 27 years ago, or as I like to refer to it as my past life, when I was a first grade teacher. Classroom management pretty much meant that you had a, classroom behavior plan. Mine was the stoplight method, where green meant you were having a great day, and yellow meant I've had to warn you once or twice, and red meant, your parents are going to be notified that you did not stop your behavior. And then as far as the learning management, that was pretty much walking around nonstop the classroom and making sure students were staying on task, which made it really hard to work individually with students or in groups of students as needed. So thankfully, over the last 27 years, obviously, technology has come such a long way and opened up unlimited possibilities for teachers and educators in the classroom. With COVID, that accelerated things very quickly, and it made it necessitated the need, obviously, for one-to-one student devices and for teachers to really embrace technology and the unlimited possibilities that it opened up for them and for their students. And now that they have discovered that, there's really no turning back. Their teachers are excited, students are excited, and it just has really enhanced the whole learning process for everyone involved. So with that, let's talk about FileWave's classroom management tool. It's a standalone tool that we hope and have done lots of research and planning and talking to educators and things, and hopefully have developed a great asset for the classroom management. So just a couple quick highlights. Teacher controlled environment. What does that exactly mean? It's easy to say that, but what does that mean for the educators in the classroom? So one thing is, as teachers have been asking for a long time, they're concerned what students are doing on their devices during the lessons. ClassSpaces does allow for you to see what each student's screen throughout the lesson, so that you can redirect as needed back to the lesson if they're visiting other websites that they shouldn't be on during the lesson, or you can totally lock them down into the lesson and not allow them to go anywhere else, and unlock as needed if you have different sites or you have tabs available that you want them to visit. Engaging and interactive classrooms. What does this mean? ClassSpaces allows for students to present on their screen to everyone in the class, or in a screen up front. And it also allows for small group interaction and a very important teacher-controlled chat with students. And also, for me, a big thing with students was trying to individualize lessons or the follow-up materials to a lesson you have taught to the whole group for particular students' learning styles or for ability levels. And this allows you to do that and prepare ahead of time and have those materials available. So that to me is huge. That goes into with improved focus and attention, right? So you can make sure that everything is already loaded on the student devices and available, and allow certain students different materials that you have loaded in. It also allows you to change your lesson on a dime for any student or any group. If you have given them materials and you're watching their progress, which by the way, ClassSpaces also allows, you can see maybe that whatever materials you provided them are not their learning style or not at their ability level, and you can immediately live offer different materials and chat that group or that student individually and redirect them to the new materials you've provided. Simplified use of devices. This is very, very, very easy to set up. It is also easy for the students that once they're in your classroom, they automatically have access to the lesson and everything that you want them to have that you've preloaded into. You can have web pages loaded, the materials loaded, videos, all those kinds of things at their fingertips as soon as they walk into your classroom. Easy setup and manage. ClassSpaces does work along with your SIS system. Currently, we are able to work with Clever and ClassLink, but we are going to expand that. So if you do use something else, we are very interested in what you are using and are gathering that information for future releases of ClassSpaces. And then supports all device types. This is huge, especially with, BYOB and things like that, one classroom may have many different types of devices, and we all know school districts rarely just use one type of device for all of their students and teachers. So ClassSpaces does support Mac, Windows, iOS, Android. Now, iOS is going to be supported, but currently that is going to be released in May. So that is not available right at the moment, but it is coming very, very soon. So, so how can you learn more about ClassSpaces? If you want to flip to the next slide, Josh, thank you. You can visit our website, classspaces.org, and it will give you an overview and a little bit more in-depth information than I've provided. There's also a link on the website where you can sign up for our next informational webinar, classspaces.org/demo. Our next one is actually tomorrow, March 17th. We already have several people signed up, but if you are interested, please feel free to go to our website and sign up. Or you can contact us at info@classspaces.org. Contact us is pretty much wide open, whether you want more information, whether you've been to our webpage or you have attended a demo already and you would like to offer feedback on maybe what you would like to see in the future or anything like that. If you would like, if you're like, this looks great, but I would need my curriculum director or some of my teachers to see ClassSpaces, please reach out to the contact us and we will be happy to set up a one-on-one demo with anyone you would like us to. Or if you're like, hey, I want to pilot this in a small group, I want teachers' hands on it or curriculum directors' hands on it, again, send us a note. We'll be happy to contact you, set up a call and get things set up. And also as far as pricing information, things like that, send us a note. We will reach out to you and provide any information that you need. So with that, again, there is one tomorrow, March 17th, just to remind everybody that you can sign up for that by going to the website and the demo link. And with that, I will turn it back over to Josh to a customer favorite session every e-meeting that we have with the Ask Me Anything session. So thank you, Josh.
Oh, you're welcome. So now we're going to do the usual, the Ask Me Anything, when usually in chat, you'll put questions. We'll be watching the chat and try and show the answer. On the off chance that we can't answer something here, then maybe we'll figure out how to connect and get you the answer. But usually for most things, we can answer it. And Tony's on here, I'm on here. We have, I believe, Mateo, PN, Sean, Emma, Bao, Dennis, and possibly Jefferson on. So a lot of sources of information. And I think maybe in the past, Dennis might be the only one that folks haven't seen on an Alliance event, and he's kind of running the Windows side of things. So, he'd be able to speak about, or answer about Windows MDM kind of things. But otherwise, I think we've all been on these. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing this slide. And then we could get started. Let me make it so I can see the chat. Okay. And then I don't know if if maybe Bao and Emma, if you want to look for questions and kind of read the question off, and or Sean.
There was a question earlier about the integration of the web admin pieces and quoting the 18 months. I just want to clarify if I wasn't clear. It's over those 18 months that we'll be moving functionality. It's not, 18 months and then, here it all is all at one time. So it'll be piecemeal, piece at a time over that time period.
Yeah, and just to add to that, the bit about doing the recurring webinars and Foundry content. For anyone under here who hasn't looked at Foundry, this is what Foundry looks like. This is one of the courses. If you go back there, if you've gone there in the past, you'll see that there's already been some cleanup, some removal of topics that, like FileWave Lightning or imaging a Mac through NetBoot, which isn't really done anymore. So that's been trimmed out. And then our next steps are to go through each module and refresh to talk about what can be done in web, what can be done in native, the best way to do it the way the product is today. So you may want to check it out and see what's over here, and you'll see it change over time. And I'm sure we'll send marketing emails out to let folks know when we have significant content added.
There was a question here about making PowerShell scripts a little bit easier to run than they are today. And that's kind of an open issue for us we've been talking about recently. I think Dennis is on and maybe he wants to give a word or two here, but we were talking about moving the FileWave client to a 64-bit client. And it's a perfect opportunity. I'm curious, how many of you out there still have 32-bit Windows clients? Because they still do exist, but mostly in consumer class devices. I'm curious if anybody has actual 32-bit Windows devices out there. Oh, Mike does. All right, so that's a good question. So we're kind of looking at two different things, possibly doing the FileWave client as a 64-bit client, which avoids this wrapper that Josh is talking about here, and possibly also talking about just including this wrapper in the FileWave, when you do a PowerShell script, so that it automatically will run it in the right space.
Oh, and I saw a question, Foundry at no cost. Foundry used to have a cost, but we've transitioned to having Foundry have no cost. If you can't log into Foundry today for some reason, just contact customer experience or myself, or you could email that professional.services@filewave.com if you want, because the way it is today, we have to enable a contact to get in, but we're doing some transitions to a new customer relationship system. And the way we're going to set it up, everybody by default will be able to, if you're a contact, you'll be able to get into Foundry without having to ask for it. The only thing paid in Foundry is if you do a FileWave certification, and that might be a good idea, especially after the content is refreshed.
Josh, there was a good question there about looking at some of your, since you have the screen up with your custom fields there, about maybe highlighting a couple of those and what you do with some of those custom field scripts.
Actually, yeah. So this one is one that some version of it will end up in the knowledge base. And it's kind of like the idea that Manu gave about reading a file to, read a custom field to be able to do something. And in this case, I have a file where I put a setting, and that setting will, and you can see here, I'm reading the status of it, putting it into this custom field. And on Windows, you can do the exact same thing. I can get content from the file. And so Mac or Windows, cross-platform, you can read this in. And what this does is, if the file doesn't exist, it puts a setting of new. So I know, okay, this has never been set before, this value on these machines. And if it's new, I want to know that. And then there's an action that's going to happen, and that action will change that field as well. So I have a file set that I will show you, and this may be something that many folks are interested in. So if I go to this file set, the very first thing it does is write to that file. It says, okay, the script called 1 was the last thing that ran. It does its thing. And then the effect of setting that field will put it in one of 2 smart groups. And now, why would I want to toggle between smart groups? Well, if you put something in the kiosk, right? And let's say it's a tool that you just want to run over and over. There's always been this longstanding request of, I want to put something in the kiosk and just let the user run it. And then maybe tomorrow they run it again. In an hour, they run it again. And there's not really a mechanism built in to FileWave to do it, just by clicking a box, right? But there might be one day, but there's not today. So what I did was, whenever this runs, when you get set to new, you go into the first smart group automatically. Then when you run the file set from the kiosk, it actually moves you to the other smart group. And so what happens is you're associated to 2 copies of the same file set. So in this one, you're associated to file set 1, in this one, file set 2, but they do the exact same thing. They're kind of a copy of each other, except for setting the value of which one ran. And so for the user, they'll see an install button in the kiosk all the time. But really behind the scenes, it's flip-flopping between groups. And I do that with these 2 smart groups, and I do that with these 2 file sets. And the script does all the work of the tool. My tool is going to, for Mac or Windows, elevate somebody to be an administrator for some period of time, let's say 30 minutes or the next time they reboot, and then demote them again, because that's been a request actually 3 times in the past 2 weeks from different people. So where normally professional services charges for custom work, this is something that I felt was more needed across the board. So it's going to just end up in the knowledge base. Might end up part of the Foundry as a class too, to explain how I got to this place to do this. So I hope that made sense. I didn't know if there were any questions about that.
I haven't seen any specific questions about that, but there was a question about the associations to deployments converter tool that we looked at before, as far as the conflict resolution that we did between that it's a direct association or kiosk. That's a little bit of in a prototype, of course, we're looking to kind of create the most complex scenario so that you can see how it would be handled. But in most cases, if you wanted something to be both kiosk and direct associated to devices, you would do 2 deployments for that. So in general, the deployments are going to be, the options for the deployments are going to drive how many deployments you have. But the nice thing about moving the associations to deployments is you're going to have a lot less items to manage. So in a perfect world, if we were doing like a Chrome deployment and we wanted to send that to, all devices in a kiosk manner, we're probably not even going to create a deployment specifically for Chrome. We're just going to add Chrome to a kind of all devices kiosk association that we already have.
If I could, I'll go back to my to the same concept. I realized there was one element I didn't show, that not everybody might be, an expert, I guess, at this, but smart groups. Smart groups can do so much. And this smart group, for instance, is based on an inventory query, right? And of course, when you make a smart group, you get the choice of whether you pick those couple of fields or an inventory query. And an inventory query, you can do complicated things like, I want it to be a Mac or a Windows system, and I want it where the custom field is a value of new or 2. And I want it to, if it's 2, I want it to be in the 1 smart group. This is part of that whole flip-flopping. And I didn't want this applied to all my machines, right? Because when you do something, you really don't want to just start off sending something to all your machines. So I have a custom field called experiment that's just a true false. And if experiment is true, then they're part of this experiment. That's the way that I control whether it's assigned to everybody. And of course, custom fields could be just assigned to specific devices. So when you go in here, you don't necessarily have to assign to all devices. You can pick devices to assign them to. Because again, this custom field, if you've coded it badly, could do some damage. So you're always going to want to test. Some other, fields that I use, I believe that these are in the knowledge base. They just read in the settings from FileWave client. So if I want to confirm that something really has a booster set, I could easily report on that. BitLocker key is interesting. We show FileVault keys in product, but you might want BitLocker keys if you don't have somewhere that you're escrowing them that or if you're not really managing BitLocker, but you want to be able to collect the keys in case somebody turned on BitLocker. This is a very simple thing to get a key to a custom field. There is also, there may be like a log file you want to monitor. For instance, my Elevate permissions. So right now what it does is it just reads that log. Here's Windows, here's Mac OS, and it will just output it. You could also use things like tail on the Mac to just take the last couple of lines, because if it's a giant log, you really don't want to fill a custom field with a giant log of information, because when you add that field to your admin, that's going to cause some slowness if you have a lot of clients and very large entries. So I try my best for any log that could be large to only show a little bit of it. This one I think Bao gave to me, but this was like an example of, software updates spits out some updates and you do a little processing, you end up with a number. So pretty much Mac or Windows, anything you could think of, and you can see here's the Windows equivalent, you can report on through custom fields. So if you don't use custom fields today, you should definitely think about if there's something you can't get from FileWave. You could talk to professional services or somebody like Manu, a partner of ours that could likely help you get the thing you want. So any other questions come in that I could show an answer to? Or
there have been a few requests to go over TeamViewer setup and license distribution and everything.
Oh, okay. I could do that. That would take a couple of minutes, but that is doable. So the first thing is, I'm going to point you at the knowledge base, right? Because there are a few platforms. I'm going to maybe talk specifically about Mac and Windows just to keep it easy. I mean, iOS similarly would have, well, iOS is a little different, but let's just talk about Mac and Windows for the moment. Because I'm thinking, especially on the Mac, that might be where people struggle with the profiles. So this current version of this article was actually from Sean. So what it is this TCC profile and an installer. And in our case, we're using TeamViewer host, which can receive a connection, but can't like go out and remote control someone else's machine. So if you're like a FileWave admin who's controlling people's machines, you want the full version of TeamViewer on your machine so you can control others. But your endpoints, you may want TeamViewer hosts so they can just be controlled by others. So what I would do is, and maybe I will grab this and just kind of set it up to walk you through. Right, so I grab this, and then I will move my windows around on my other screen. And I'm just unzipping the two zip files so that I can bring them in, right? And so if I go to file sets, and I'm doing this in the native admin, I know, but I was here anyway, so. Okay, so that's gonna take it just a moment to upload. But then when it's done, it will have a profile and a host install. And one really neat thing that I'm gonna show you is, so, there's the issue of how do I make sure the profile is on the Mac first? And Sean actually accounted for that. If you look at the scripts, you'll see that there's a requirement script. So for anyone who doesn't know, a requirement script allows you to say, well, this should not install. In fact, it doesn't even download unless the requirements is passed. So in this case, you can see that it's looking to see if a profile is installed. And this profile is this profile. So if you were to assign this to, let's say, a smart group of your Macs, what you would see on the devices is, and actually I could do this. So I will go and I'll assign them to my lab machine. So TeamViewer host install. I'm just going to assign it to one machine because I don't want to do things to my whole lab. But once that's assigned, then when I go to my client, you're going to see they're associated. And I don't know, I guess I'll wake up that Mac, but depending on how quickly this plays out, I'll tell you that you will see that the host install will say that it didn't pass the verification script, but that's normal. It'll say that until this profile is installed. And, you know, on, for instance, Big Sur in Monterey, that's handled by MDM. So we, you know, kind of throw it over the wall and okay, that happened pretty quick. So requirements not met. So that's not a problem. This hasn't failed. It's that it's waiting for this profile to install. Once it's installed, the requirements will pass and then it will turn right around and install it. And you will have accomplished setting 2 of the 3 things that TeamViewer says that it needs, because screen recording can't be set through a profile. So that would be the only thing that TeamViewer, you know, would possibly complain about, but we are limited by the requirements that Apple makes around what you can set. Okay. Now for Windows, if I again go here.
Josh, question on that requirement script. Do we have that published in the knowledge base about how you can use a requirement script to look for a particular profile? That'd be a really good one to add if we don't.
The text of it is mentioned in here, so if somebody was to search, they might hit upon this article and see it, but there's not, I don't know that there's an article that, you know, takes this example and makes it just a specific example, but I could do that.
No, there isn't. It's on my to-do list.
Ah, good. So Sean will perhaps do that. So
that was Sean Holden, everybody. He has promised to do that by. Did you promise to do that, Sean?
Yeah, Thursday, November the.
Just don't say which Thursday. And you're
yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
But yeah, the so for anyone who doesn't know, Sean's spent his time in support here at FileWave, and he's moving over to professional services. We're training the person that will be taking the support cases in Europe, or I should say Sean is, and Rudy, and others are training the person that will. And so as we get more and more of Sean's time, it means the knowledge base and Foundry will benefit from Sean's knowledge, because he really is good at tinkering with things and documenting them. So on the Windows side, similarly, there are some things that we do. And actually on the Mac side too with TeamViewer. TeamViewer host, if you install it, you'll notice that it wants to pop up a little wizard at the end of the install. We suppress that. And in the knowledge base article, it says how we did that. Same thing on the Windows side. We suppress it, you know, with this. And I actually don't really have to download this and do it, because there's nothing, no like, well, maybe I'll download it just to show, but it's easier than on the Mac side, I'd say, because we don't have to deal with TCC profiles. And if I go,
hey Josh, it might be good too to just show that
the switches
script in the like that requirement script in that web editor, right? That does the better color coding and such.
Yes, I could do that. Yeah, I'll do that right after I show. So this one, if you look at the TeamViewer host scripts, you know, you'll see that, oh, it's just really running the setup exe. But if I do properties, you can see it runs with a silent switch, and it uses this options file. This option file is put there. It's a content of the file set. So if you were to look, if you were to double click on the Windows one, you know, you can see, you know, what all is in here, right? And so if we were to look at the options file, you'll see that it's just a series of registry keys. TeamViewer documented a way to kind of export settings. And so you could take this and you could tweak it too. We just want to give everybody like a starting point that makes it easy. And then to Tony's point, if I go in the FileWave admin and I go to payloads and I go to my Elevate permissions for Mac, and then I go to scripts, you can see that here's my script, and I want to edit it, and you can see how much better editing in here with the colorization is. It's much easier to make edits. At least it's much easier to make edits and not mess up, because you can see all the colorization. Like if you miss a quote, then you would see that this whole line would be green, perhaps, if I missed the end quote. So this editor is quite a bit nicer. You know, and so you really can do these things in the web admin. You know, so I could have had either starting point at this point, but I would say it'd be a good practice for folks to come into the web admin and see what can be done. For the moment, the concept of deployments being separate from associations is a challenge, but that's where the tool that you know, Tony spoke about, you know, would come in handy, where you could, you know, flip associations over to deployments and then move forward with doing deployments for everything, if that's what you wanted. And if somebody accidentally made another association, you could easily migrate it over right after. Be no harm. It's not like you'd have to redo your work.
And I think next time we'll probably do some content in the next Alliance event on kind of a deployment strategy, because that before you even start doing them, you want to have an idea of what you're looking to accomplish. It's kind of like cleaning out your garage. We're going to take everything out, but then we're going to reorganize and put these tools here or there. That's the same thing that when we look to start cleaning up associations, we'll probably want to do that. But the first thing you have to decide is, how do I want to deploy? Am I deploying an application to multiple groups, or do I want to think of it more as the destination instead, that I want to deploy to, say, the entire EU division, or do I want to deploy to the States, and then I have some things that are kiosk and some things that are not, etc. So we need to think about that before you kind of start. So I think next time maybe we'll cover that a bit.
Yeah, and actually I should carry this TeamViewer thing a little bit further. So once you got TeamViewer on a device, what dictates whether you can right-click on the device and say to remote control it or not? It's the same permissions as the Observe client. So there's two things. So there's on filewave.com, when you go to do a custom PKG or a custom MSI, right, there is a setting about remote control being enabled and remote control prompting. So these same permissions are used both for Observe and TeamViewer. So however you've decided to do Observe, TeamViewer would work as well. And if you needed to change these settings, you could, for instance, push out a thing called a superpref. And if you look in the knowledge base, you'll see that's just a way to overwrite client settings, you know, and change it. You could, and I want to point out actually a bug that, you know, before it bites somebody, because we already addressed it. So when you right click, you'll see that I only have remote prompt. I don't have unattended. But if I show the original and you right click, you can see I can do unattended. And we already know about this, and it's already been addressed. It just snuck through in the latest release. So if you're wondering, if you're looking at a device and wondering, why can't I do an unattended? Think about if you're looking at a clone of a device. And the next update, that should be addressed. It's just kind of a minor thing, but I can see how it would confuse somebody. Also, to do TeamViewer to see this at all as well, you can see it here, and you can definitely do remote control here. So if I go here, let's see, you can see that I could do remote session against those devices. In fact, in the web, it does not have that issue with the clones. You can pick a clone here and pick to do a remote session. It was just a native admin bug. As well, you need the right to use TeamViewer, or I should say the license to use TeamViewer. And for anyone who hasn't seen it, because I've spoken with a few people recently who just didn't know where to turn it on. So in Manage Administrators, you come to the TeamViewer tab, and you'll see that in my case, these were from my testing, that I had these users. And a couple of things about these. So when I add somebody and I put in, Jay Smith, this has to match who they log in as. So if you, for instance, set up single sign-on to log in from Azure or Google or Okta, then your username might be like, josh.levitsky@filewave.com. That might be mine if I set that up. So you're going to want to, see what your login is, because, when you set up SSO, you don't have the user over here. You have the group for that SSO. However, licensing for TeamViewer is per person. And this highlights an example of what you should not do, because the TeamViewer licenses are assigned to a person, not to a generic account. And the problem that you'll have is, although you might technically be able to make a user called, sysadmin or assign it to FWAdmin, we have controls in place so that you can't remote control from multiple locations with the same username. So that's in place, not because we want to make things harder for you. It's because of the licensing with TeamViewer that it really is a per person thing. So we had to put controls in place to enforce that. And this interface should get better over time. For instance, I could add a user called Bob, and maybe I'll do that because I have 5 licenses, so I won't really mess myself up. Yeah, sure, I want to assign it. Oh, I can't because I'm pointed at a test server. So ignore that. So I didn't mess myself up. So my service pointed at a test environment, and so ignore that. But if you made a user with a capital B for Bob, it is case sensitive, these usernames, and that would be sort of a problem. So be very sure about the user you create. You can only change them after 6 months has passed. That's why this date is here. That too is from licensing requirements with TeamViewer, with our contract with them. If something happens though, and you did put in a user that doesn't exist, reach out to support, because we're going to figure that out with you. Because these controls are all in place to control licensing agreements. They're not in place to make your life harder. So definitely reach out to support if you created a user who doesn't really exist, or accidentally created FWAdmin as a user, and then you realize that you probably shouldn't have, and you want to set up a different user. But once I have the rights, then I could remote control a machine, once I've done all these things that I showed. This will also make it to Foundry. This is part of content that we don't have in Foundry because this is so new, and it will be in Foundry as part of the classes. Any other questions come up? Oh, I did see a license question as I'm skimming through, but the licenses included, there's a couple of licenses included. It's based on kind of customer size, what ends up being, because we do pay for the TeamViewer licenses. So like, imagine if we just built it all and it was all just our cost, we could be more flexible, but we actually pay TeamViewer for them. So you'll have 1 or 2, possibly there could be different numbers, right? If you're a person with 200,000 licenses, then it may be a different number. You'll see it, so it's not a mystery to anybody. When you go to Manage Administrators, you're going to see on the TeamViewer tab how many licenses you have in your instance. If this says 0 for some reason, then that's probably an error, and you should reach out to us and let us know. But otherwise, yeah.
Sorry, Josh. there are some customers that do have 0, and it's 100% intentional. If you've got a license which limits your, so if you click on the server drop down,
Oh, yes, the privacy thing.
you
Right.
can't do it with that window open, but yeah, if
Yeah,
you click on the server drop down and an activation code, okay,
and then bring this
right.
over.
So some customers have got to allow collection of personal data set to no. It's hard fixed on at the license end. If you have a license of that nature, that impacts TeamViewer as well. So you will have 0 showing. Okay, so that would be intentional.
That is a good catch. That is the one exception where that would be the case. Now, if you did that, you probably did it on purpose because you don't want personal data collection. But if that was set to no, and for instance, you were a school in the US and you can't think of a reason why you would have done it, reach out to us because maybe it's set wrong in the license. I mean, either way, if it's set to no and you're trying to use TeamViewer, then speak with us and we can chat through like what the impact would be if TeamViewer was to be able to be activated.
Additionally, if you were to look at the client monitoring preferences, if anyone's wondering, how do you set the idea of prompt user or not prompt user or what have you?
Oh, yeah.
So
let
the
me.
client monitor you've got there.
Yeah, but
is it offsite?
I have to. No. It's here. I just have to steal its IP address.
Yeah.
Actually, I can do it the easy way. I think I have it in here as. No, that's not right.
There it is. Oh.
Yeah, but I don't think that actually matches my VM. Oh, it does. Oh, right, because I was setting up a test. And then I monitor, and then paste. And then let's see if it will connect to my VM. Otherwise, I could do it on my Mac. Yeah, I'll do it on my Mac. One sec. I think that's the IP, unless it changed. It is 143. Well, there we go. There's always a reason. In this case, it was a typo. There we go. So you were going to have me bring up preferences, right?
Yeah.
Here's where I have to see. I set this to a random thing. So imagine that you come here to preferences and you set it. That I just hadn't prepared to go there, so I didn't.
Sorry.
No. I had built the client for that Mac the other day, and I just put a random thing in, thinking I wasn't going to use Observe Client, and I wasn't going to do. Yeah, I probably should have thought about that for this, but yes, you could set it here too if you wanted to tweak somebody.
Your script should be successful by now, right?
Which one?
The requirement script for the profile.
That's a lot of pressure to make him go back and look at that now to make sure it worked.
It is. And not only is it installed successfully, I do see the icon on it. So let's just take this demo, even make it more risky. Let's show the original so that I can do it. And actually, no, let's use the web admin because I should use the web admin too. We're actually going to test if I actually have TeamViewer installed on my Mac because that's where you would run into problems. I do have TeamViewer, it looks like. And that should, no, I did not. Well, that's where unplanned demos are sometimes problematic, but let's make sure I actually have, oh, okay. So when I show the status, you can see I have TeamViewer Host installed. So the problem I ran into is I was testing TeamViewer Host where I could be controlled, but TeamViewer Host does not permit me to control somebody. So I'd have to turn around and put the full TeamViewer on here, which I could actually do. That would only take a second.
Are you trying to control the same machine they're using to control?
No, it's a MacBook sitting off to the side, but I have TeamViewer Host on my admin machine because I was playing with TeamViewer Host. Someone might do that also if they didn't realize that they needed the full TeamViewer to be on their machine. Exit TeamViewer, quit.
And this is where I'll put on my teacher hat and say, this is why you always try to work in VMs when you're testing stuff so that you never impact your production machine with it.
That is true. So if I go here and I go here, so this is sort of a good lesson, right? So for the Mac, the reason that we give the full install, but we say host is recommended, is because you as a FileWave admin actually need to have the full TeamViewer to control anything. So you'll see, once I run that install, continue. And if I had a lot of admins, I might make this into a file set so that my admin machines would get the full TeamViewer, and not have to run it on a one-off. Okay, so then if I launch TeamViewer, okay, so then let's go back and do our example of controlling somebody. So I have this machine, and we're going to say don't prompt user because that permission was set. Let's see, I'm going to say it should allow to open TeamViewer, and I can see that machine. So this is, now on the other machine, it does ask me about using the microphone, and the only preference, so I'm not sure why in my demo I don't see the other windows, but it's funny because, so I think I just have a sort of a glitch on that machine.
No, that's the screen recording. So because we can't pre-approve screen recording, you can get to the device for certain elements. So, things that we can allow, things like full disk access and that kind of stuff. So you've got the basics of connection. But because Apple stop us from doing screen recording, that's the only thing you'll see until that's approved.
Yeah, I forgot that as I was doing this, and that was the thing that I mentioned earlier, that the TCC profile took care of 2 of the 3 things that you need, but we're limited a little bit by Apple requirements. And so, in fact, now you can see everything. And so when I connected to this machine, the only requirement was making sure that screen recording was working. But otherwise, I could see the title bar there. I'd have to just tell the user. And TeamViewer complains to you. It'll say it here if you do check system access. So what it would be is these 2 would be green, so you won't have to talk a user through those. But this one, you would have to do that, and then they'd end up on the security and privacy, and they'd have to check this. But we just took that, in an unplanned demo from not being on that machine to installed. And me as an admin having the full team viewer on my machine and remote controlling it from the web admin.
And I just wanted to add, while we can't enable screen recording through a profile, you can allow standard users to have access to enable it. So if the person you're logging into is a standard user, you can set that up so they can approve it versus having to have administrator rights.
That's a good point. I don't know if our TeamViewer article currently has that explained, but we could take a look at the wording again and just be sure. So, and obviously on the Windows side, I would have just been able to connect to my Windows machine. Yeah, I saw John point out in the chat that the privacy settings with the Observe client is the same issue. No, and the privacy setting allow screen recording is a one and done, Bobby. So, and I would, I would also say that back like when I was a customer and I had an Apple person, it's super important to tell your Apple rep if something is an issue. Now, they may not make any change, but if they hear from 50 schools that there needs to be a managed way to enable screen recording, then you guys know from opening support cases with Apple that there's like whenever you open a ticket, you say the number of devices impacted, right? And that adds up, and the more devices impacted by something, Apple makes it a priority. And so when I was, a customer of Apple's more directly, I used to, make connections at other companies and see if people that were peers of mine had similar challenges. And then we would all open up tickets and add up the total number of devices we had. We'd, and that would help. And so if you don't speak to your Apple rep, you probably should, make sure to let them know, because, a lot of them do care. And if you work with, like, I know some of the professional services people there care a lot. And so if you're ever working with them, maybe pass the message through them too. So, anything else? I know we're coming up, we have about 4 minutes. So if I missed anything critical.
I think the questions well is drying up a little bit.
That's okay. At least we got to show off TeamViewer setup, at least for Mac and Windows. If I went to set up iOS, it would be similar, stumbling through a little bit. Although actually, this dialog is that file set that I was talking about, the flip-flop file set that makes somebody an admin for a period of time. So that will make it to the knowledge base.
John, when you have a device that's reporting location, there'll be an additional location tab in the device's detail view in the web admin. So when you click on an individual device in the web admin, it opens up a kind of a detail view that's similar to client info, but actually better. It has more detail in there, more information. There'll be an additional tab if you've got a device that's reporting location. I don't know if you have an example, Josh.
I think I do, but I didn't prepare for it. So if I don't, there it is. And I could open this in Google Maps. Oh, Kansas. This is that famous like address that everything shows up as when the location's not known. The police have visited them a lot for stolen things, and it's not actually stolen. Yeah, so that one's a bad example.
But I'm guessing in this case, you just didn't want to be swatted or anything, so you
have
to show somebody else.
Yeah. So that spot in Kansas, if you ever see that, is a kind of a known address for all, like for cell phone geolocation and stuff. I don't have one that's doing location right now.
Well, I'm looking forward to that kiosk flipper thing getting posted in the knowledge base, because I think that's really super useful.
Yeah. Definitely if you need to run something once, or not once, but repeatedly for an end user, so they don't have to keep opening up a ticket. You don't have to keep picking to resend a package. You could definitely use this idea, and it would use potentially 2 smart groups to operate, to flip, and then 2 file sets for, because you have to flip-flop, and then 1 custom field to track the status of the flipping. But you could repeat this for other tools. I'm going to show this tool specifically, but I'm also going to explain in the article how you could use this process for anything. Kind of separate the flipping process from the making them an admin process. And I have it working pretty well on the Mac. I'm trying to do it on Windows too. I'm just deciding how I'm going to schedule tasks, whether I use just Task Scheduler or whatever on Windows 10 and 11.
Josh, there are 2 final questions here. The question on TeamViewer for iOS, if you look in the knowledge base, and in fact, Josh, if you want to show from the web admin that integrated help, when you're in, say, the devices view, if you go to the help icon there at the top, you're going to see that has a link about TeamViewer. And on that landing page, go ahead and go to that. And on that landing page, you'll see that there's a breakout of all the different things for all the different platforms, all the articles. So yeah, there's all the instructions there for each platform. And then Josh, if you want to hop back in the web admin for a moment, John was asking about how do you set device to missing mode?
That was set tracking state, right?
Yep.
And that's that same thing that you see like in the native, where you right click, whoops, cancel, where you right click and you go here. Like this same dialog is here. And you can see it's, it meets the same function, and I think it's a little nicer. So actions for devices are here. When you have multiple devices selected, a lot of times commands might appear up here that you might do across. So like I could tell both of these to do a verify. So, you might see different things here to do to many devices than what you see on kind of the one-off.
And what's cool about this integration in the web is that you can then use the API to do that. So if you wanted to do something really nifty, like have a smart group for devices in a certain state that you automatically put it in missing mode, you can do that with those API calls programmatically.
And I actually do, I do single app mode, right? So think about like if you like to put a device in a single app mode and show an app that says like return my device, as an example, because I had a customer that wanted to do that. I set a custom field through the API that put them in a smart group and then assign the profile with the single app mode. But you can also, pretty much anything that you can do in the web admin, like setting that missing mode, you can do through APIs. There is one difference that Sean and I, when we were talking about it, he pointed out. Not every API is fully documented. So if we go, and I know we're a couple minutes over, so we'll just do this and wrap up. But if I go to my server /API/doc, you get to all the documented APIs, right? And, for particular APIs, it may explain what parameters are used for it so that you know what it would do. A lot of times from the name, you can tell, what the thing does. There might be a description here about what it does. There might be a try it out, which depending on the thing, it might not work the best to try it out in this interface. You may want to make just a simple script that does it. And again, professional services or one of our partners can help you with that. We do plan to, in Foundry, make an API course. We already will do API consulting through professional services directly. But from this page, the reason that I could try it out is because I was authenticated already to the web admin. So I was logged in as FW admin. Somebody, if you go to this page, you can't do anything on it unless you're authenticated. There's another way to authenticate. I don't want to go too far down the API rabbit hole, but there are private APIs. And if you see private in the API, it's not documented. It is subject to change from version to version. And so you might just want to be cautious. You know, it may accomplish the thing you want, but you just want to be cautious knowing that it's not a documented API. I know I've showed this before, but I'll just show it quickly as my kind of my last thing.
And I would mention, if you run across one that's private that you think should be public, they're not private all necessarily for a reason other than to make sure that we're fully committed to them. So you can request those. So if you, when you talk to the service desk folks, etc., if you say, hey, I think this thing should really be public, we can prioritize getting that done too.
Yeah, there's and so the way that you would learn about what it is, you know, let's say I want to see, I click on this device and you can see some things happen, right? And let's just drag this off to the side for the second, and let's go to custom fields. What did I want to do? I want to do something that makes a change. So maybe I'll edit a device field. And I think I did this in an example, another example, but Bob had a baby, it's a boy. And if you're like 40 years old, you remember what that is, or older. So, okay, so then I set that. And so what you're gonna do is you're gonna, you know, look through this. These are the things that happen. You can see it's a short list. You can also clear the list at any time. But you can see like, okay, here's this one that was like an edit. And what was in the payload? Well, okay, this one isn't it. So let's say I was super confused and I didn't know what it was because I let too much stuff go in here, because that's gonna get you frustrated. So what you do is you hit clear and you edit device fields and you say, I'll just add something to it. And then I could stop recording because I don't want anything else to go in there. And then I can see, okay, so this had something, right? So if I view the source, that was to edit. If I view source, oh, look, here's Bob had a baby, it's a boy with a Z on it, which is what I just did. So I can look at this and know that it was this URL, and I could figure out that this is probably the device ID. I look for that number. You can see up here, that same number. You can see this was done through a patch. So there's gets, there's patches. And if I look at the payload, well, all it was that we sent comment, Bob had a baby, it's a boy. If I view source, this is the exact thing. So I could copy and paste this into my script, and then I could be able to manipulate comments. And in PS, Bao in my group has been spending time to make kind of modular API scripts. So like if you wanted to put a device in a group through APIs, you'd have to be able to look up the device's ID. You'd have to be able to look up the group ID. And, you know, because you want to do it by like group name and device name potentially, or device serial number. And so he's been putting together kind of things to make that super easy, like puzzle pieces to build APIs. And we definitely will do that through our consulting. Some or all of it may make it into Foundry, into the API course that we want to put up. Okay.
Well, we've run over a little bit here, but we, you know, as always, we really enjoy doing these, and we really thank you all for joining us. These make, I think, good sessions and also give us great ideas for things to add to the knowledge base, feature set, you know, changes as well. So we really appreciate everybody's, you know, open and honest feedback. And thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks everybody. And these are some of that information that we shared. And please reach out to us if you need anything.
Thanks so much, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you all. See you guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Keep